So welcome everyone to this session where we're going to talk to Stuart tonight, and it's our series of coffee chats that I've created, and really just to talk to people about things that they've been having problems with, just hot topics, all sorts of different things. I've initially set it up for 4 weeks. I'm planning to do 8 weeks and have special guests with me each week who will be able to have conversations with and answer your questions. So you can propose your questions in the chat windows, or you can propose them if you're actually on the Zoom sessions because you've registered through Eventbrite. And we can have a face-to-face conversation if you so wish on the Zoom session. Just to let you know, it's also being broadcasted live out to Facebook as well, and it will be shared on Facebook. At the end of the session, we'll give you contact details to catch up with Stuart, and just to say that I know I've got 2 other names here of guests who were supposed to be with me this evening. Unfortunately, they haven't been able to make it, but they are going to be coming back in future weeks to be a guest and be part of the conversations then. And so really this idea just came out of talking out of some of my work that I do myself. And then it was an idea really that got me to think about how I could communicate with the people on the meetup group and serve them in a way that allows them to talk about the problems that they're experiencing, and then I can help them in possibly some of the ways, the trainings or the events that I coordinate for them. And so certainly I've got guests and experts that are in particular fields, and that's where Stuart comes in tonight. So I'm just going to get Stuart to introduce himself to you and tell us a little bit about you, Stuart.
Hi, thanks, Marilyn. Yeah, so I'm a intuitive coach, that's the way, or an awareness coach, I sometimes describe myself. Trained in the natural success method, which is where you and I met. I'm an ex-accountant, but I'm a recovering one, so that's okay.
Yes. Lovely. And so tonight we're just going to talk about 2 topics. I've kind of combined them together because they actually do work quite well. And so what we want to talk about is really what people might have experienced in 2020, maybe what your problems that your clients might have experienced that you've worked with as a coach in 2020, and then moving on to 2021, like which is the future aspects or the vision aspects, where we can talk about what might 2021 look like, what could people do in 2021 that would be different to 2020, and like really how people can be a little bit more in control of their circumstances. And I guess in one way, in kind of context here, I put up a post on Instagram about a week ago talking about how we can really get caught up in our circumstances. And certainly in 2020, we had to try and be innovative and think about different ways of doing our normal daily, monthly, celebratory, whatever activities that we wanted to do with friends and family. Just finding new ways of doing things. And so it really relied on us actually digging deep and trying to figure out how we could do something within a different environment that we were normally used to. And maybe that caused a lot of upset and stress and confusion and all sorts of things for people. So I just wanted to have a look at some of these things, and we're going to talk about probably a little bit further on about like how people have adapted and stuff. So, but maybe if we just start with, what are some of the problems that you have been working through with your clients in 2020, or what have they been struggling with?
Well, I think the main thing is you and I, we tend to live our lives from our thoughts and feelings, which are not actually real. We've made them up. The circumstances behind them that created them and reinforced them may be real, but the thoughts and feelings themselves aren't. But as we go into times like we're in at the moment, because candidly we're still in those circumstances right now, it just exacerbates all of those things, and that's what's been displaying. So taking an extreme example, one of my clients, his underpinning belief that he wasn't good enough, and when I finally managed to speak to him after we went into the first lockdown and all the rest of it, it was so obvious that it was his fault. The whole pandemic was because he wasn't good enough. You know, his business would still be flourishing and everything else if only he had been better.
Wow.
And that's the extremes that these things can go to. So, you know,
Mm,
some of the work that we do, I helped him to refocus and reframe and not to. I love an expression from our work that it's not personal, it's structural.
mm,
And it's, you know, when we're deep in the structure of our beliefs and the hold they can have upon us, it's so hard to see there are any alternative structures, you know, and so often it's helpful just to take a breath or two, even, and just to relinquish where you are in that moment, and then allow a fresh breath to take you somewhere else. And this guy had got so entrenched in that, all his activities were around trying to fix it, you know, to fix a world pandemic. You know, it's yeah.
mhm.
So that's an example. Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of that individual, really, just thinking about that circumstances, if that individual hadn't taken any actions, what would be what would be their future? What would they likely create?
Well, I mean, self-destruction really in one way or another.
Mm,
And you know, this particular individual was married with you know, youngish kids and all the rest of it. So I'm assuming that during lockdown, you know, their experience of that was not, of him, was not exactly optimal either. So that's the thing, it ripples on outwards. Our inner stuff can so often spill over into outer. So in that scenario, I don't think it was anger. I don't think there was abuse going on, other than self abuse, if you like.
mhm.
But he would just have been very absent, I would have thought.
Yeah. And so that detrimentally can affect the whole family's relationships, you know,
Yeah.
work, all sorts of things that could lead on to, couldn't it?
Well, part of his challenge was that you know, this was a decent sized business, you know, with 20, 30 staff, 25 staff. And so it wasn't just him. He was playing out, you know, I'm not good enough to support all of my staff, and you know, my staff don't have a job and all this kind of stuff. Whereas the reality was they were all on furlough. You know, the government was stepping in to help them, etc., etc. But that's not what was playing out for him.
Yeah. So you make a really key point there, really, that even when the circumstances are whatever they might be, that we really can allow feelings and thoughts and emotions to take the better of us and make it worse in our own mind, and just go to those scenarios where it just seems insurmountable.
Mm. Yeah, no, totally. And you know, obviously a slightly different belief with playing out there around the staff. You know, that was all worth stuff. You know, I'm still I'm bad, but it's a different sense of it. I'm, you know, feeling a real sense of guilt and shame going on in that regard.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so that's an example. You know, I've had some clients who flourished through this time, and that's not necessarily down to their own robustness, but they have flourished. So it's interesting that even in these depths of these things, you know, there is opportunity there as well. They have a business, a craft business. I'm not going to describe it any more than that, but they have a craft business, and of course, people stuck at home wanted to do craft stuff. And you know, a number of their wholesalers sadly were not functioning, and so they picked up the retail business, and they've had a good year. You know, so it's
Mm,
you never quite know. But even that can manifest in different ways. You know, he was experiencing a degree of guilt that his business was being successful while other people were struggling. So there's always, you know, there's always the potential for something else to be going on in heightened circumstances like this.
yeah.
He would never have given it a moment's thought in the normal time, but because other people could see other people around him suffering, then there was this guilt came through that his business was flourishing while other people were potentially losing theirs.
Yeah, and I suppose I guess for me, 2020 was a bit like in some ways that too, a bit of guilt about creating an online business and moving into that space rather than staying in my corporate roles. And you kind of feel like, oh well, people have been furloughed or people are not able to participate in the same things that they have or have an impact financially, but also not forgetting that there was a big part of the workforce that offers workers and many other types of roles that there was no change for them. Like where I was working in corporate before it came to that particular point and finished my contract at the end of that, um, they had so much more extra work to do. The workload was actually further increased where I was working as a contract manager, vendor manager, in that every single supplier that we had a contract with, we had to go out to them regularly, especially as the situation was evolving, and check, what's your COVID plan? What's your business continuity plan? What if we can't do this, that, and the other? And we would create a series of questions,
Mm,
working with procurement. So our workload was continually increased, and it was priority number one, that whatever else you had to do in your work, this always came above whatever you had to do. And you had to get the answers because, senior management needed to know what was business continuity to keep the business running. So it actually generated a massive amount of additional work for us, especially going backwards and forwards as the situation evolved, going, what's your plan now? What have you added now that the government's changed the rules? What else can,
mm,
how can you ensure that you can provide services to us if you have to go to a physical location? So in some ways, I mean, and I'm not saying that, people, I mean, I'm acknowledging that there've been a load of people that have been adversely affected financially, but certainly there's also a workforce of people that haven't actually, and maybe they've not been able to take their holidays and the volume of work has been there. So, they've just carried on working. So there has been a difference in, certainly in the experience that I've had. So what are some of the things that you might have experienced in 2020?
well, personally,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, I had I had an interesting situation where a large proportion of my clients were saying love you to bits, but you're a discretionary purchase when we don't know what it means to our business. So 1st of April or early end of March, beginning of April,
Yeah.
I was having a lot of those type of conversations with my clients,
Mm.
because yeah, most of my clients at that time were small business owners, and they were very uncertain what it was going to mean to them before some of the government aid came in and so on and so forth. So that was interesting, but I managed to avoid the horrible P word, which I'm not the pivot word. I managed not to try and pivot my business into something else. I know there's been a lot of conversations about that. Yes, I'm doing more online. Of course, I'm doing more online,
Mm.
but I was doing most of my coaching through Zoom anyway at that time. So I guess I just focused in on what I could influence. What all I could influence was how I thought about things, how I defined the situation, and then asked myself, is this true? Is it true that the world's coming to an end? Is it, whatever I might be thinking, is it true that I'll have no clients and the business will go down the pan? None of that is actually true. The circumstance might be that I don't have as many clients as I had before, but my thoughts and feelings about it and what I make it mean about me, oh, you're a dreadful coach, and et cetera, that those are the things that I can influence.
Yeah.
So, I just remind myself of the value that I give people, and was blessed over the summer actually that our mentor did some free trainings, which allowed me to be of service when the business was less strong. Allowed me to be of service running teams for him through those trainings. So that was very helpful.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I think, yeah, that was also a cool thing for me too, to do those trainings as well. Um, it's interesting. Also, another point that comes to me now is that in the news throughout the year, and one of the leadership trainings that I do is feminine leadership.
Mm.
Throughout the year, like, because there's a difference between leadership and the aspects of, like, we talk about the aspects of creation where there's a masculine energy and the feminine energy, and they combine together to help in a complete creation. And so, in the way of having a feminine leader or feminine leadership, those aspects are a lot of focus around innovation, thinking of new ways, like coming up with new ideas, being able to think outside the box, being able to handle multiple situations. Like, and then, not to say that, I mean, masculine people will also have these traits as well. It's a matter of
Yes.
like how much of it you're kind of balanced and using at the time. But there was news articles that were coming up about, have women CIOs or CEOs operated better under these conditions of COVID? And so suddenly starting to get some visibility on the qualities of feminine leadership and the value behind feminine leadership, through this really challenging waters that we've had to travel. So
Yeah. Well,
actually, yeah,
that's
sorry, go.
what. Well, that's what was coming to me. Is suddenly you've got a world of possibility, and that feminine, open, receptive energy um, flourishes much better in that space. As you say, there has been so much innovation. Um, One of my clients, as a completely kind of altruistic thing, it was nothing to do with their business, started a Facebook group where they were making visors for
Oh, wow.
local. Well, even the district nurses weren't being provided, would you believe, at the very start. But pharmacies
Yeah.
and nurses in GP practices and things weren't really getting any of that stuff. They reckon before it was kind of closed down, and I understand why it was closed down. There does need to be some structure and all the rest of it ultimately. But they reckon they probably created something like 250,000 visors,
Wow.
largely, well, in two ways: either people at home making them, like Blue Peter style with sticky back plastic or acetates
Mm,
and stuff. But boy, were they grateful for those when the pharmacies when we started out, um,
mm,
or through 3D printing. So local schools got on board. People with private 3D printers got involved.
yeah.
Um, so it's just things like that, and yes, it was the woman of the household who had the idea.
Yeah.
But it's
Wonderful.
yeah,
That's a great thing that, it really has forced people back into that place of being innovative and thinking about ways of doing things. I mean, that was part of the conversation that we had at the beginning. So how have you seen people adapting, or how, and even in your experience, how have you adapted in that?
well, as I say, the apart from changing my backgrounds on Zoom occasionally, like, my working life is the same as it ever was. Um,
Okay.
really, the only difference is I allow the cat in with me now, so she might make an entrance at some time. But other than that, so that hasn't changed significantly. What has changed is it's allowed me to really lean into the truth of myself. I've been doing some branding work with a a coach who's actually trained in natural success as well, um, and really stepping into my true nature and owning my true nature. Um, so, from that regard, it's been a beautiful time of self-reflection and self-growth and self-leadership. Um, all of which I understood the value of intellectually, but this has given me the opportunity and the time and the space, if you like, to start to embody
Yeah.
them further.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I mean, we've seen quite a lot of adaptation, certainly. And one of my roles, where at the vice chair of the British Computer Society, we have had to go to, virtual conference this year, which was,
Mm,
unheard of. Well,
mm,
not unheard of, certainly that happened, but that actually gave us a global face, and we had speakers from all over the world. So there's so much upside from what's happened here. And I obviously know that people have been, like, really detrimentally affected, and we have to talk about that as well.
sure.
But I mean, I think it's been such a great place for that shift of innovation. And certainly, even thinking about myself, last year, I had my 50th birthday in the year, and it was during lockdown. So people weren't comfortable coming out. I invited a number of people to meet in the park and, have picnic blankets sort of things spaced out. Um, and I had people coming back saying, well, I'm not coming out until after the vaccinations have gone round, kind of thing. And people were really still afraid, even though it was an outdoor area and it was, open air, and there was a opportunity to space out. And we actually put in the invitation, bring your own food and drinks, bring your own mattress or blanket to sit on, make sure you social distance at all times, kind of thing. So we weren't encouraging people to do anything differently or wrong, but it made me think about how could I have a celebration with people, or how can I celebrate
Mm,
like a milestone like 50, in a world where you couldn't do the same as normal. And I think that's what's been really, I think, wonderful for a lot of people. And it may be painful for people because they want to just do the same old thing, but actually that can bring excitement, figuring out a new way of doing things.
mm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, it's good to remember that was the backdrop of everything that was going on, but then life was continuing in other ways. And interestingly, something that came to me through one of my contacts recently, is this whole thing of we celebrate. Um, there was so much of this, goodbye 2020, hello 21, but and the circumstances have not gone away. It is likely to be a winter. It was always likely to be worse in the winter when we're all inside, and so on and so on and so forth. Um, I can't. Is it actually today? I'm not sure. But the Chinese New Year, even that hasn't happened on the 1st of January, and yet there's almost this metaphorical shrugging off of the old and starting of the new, which is not even aligned with the seasons. I mean, it's we're still in the
Yeah.
season of winter, and even in the Chinese New Year, we're still in the old year.
Yeah.
And it's just fascinating that we lay so much store by things of that nature, and hopefully the vaccine does damp this whole thing down, and life changes, and is more similar to how it was in the past. Um, but hey, we're pinning things on that as well, and it's been a time for me to reconnect with nature a lot more and the natural rhythm of things. And I just suddenly thought, yeah, do you know what? That probably explains why um, New Year's resolutions and New Year's Eve and all this stuff has not really resonated with me for a few years now. Um, because, well, other than being an old fart, not partying quite so much anyway nowadays, but other than that, it is kind of out of sync with the rhythm of things. Winter is for structure. Winter is for, the end of the ending of things. It's not for the beginning of things. And yet we make the 1st of January and all our New Year resolutions so important based on a calendar year rather than the cycles of nature. So I've been just kind of leaning into that. And if it means that I do have a nap in the middle of the afternoon, I have a nap in the middle of the afternoon, because it's dark at 4:30 or whatever it might be.
Amazing. I've been wanting people to do that for years.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk about 2021 a bit. I'm going to get backwards and forwards over some of these questions, but
Yeah,
we talked about possibilities, and I mean, you mentioned it right there where you talk about the new year being that crossover point, and people really have kind of invested all of their um, hope into making 2021 a much better year. And I think that really brings a possibility and an opportunity there, because you know people probably have been stuck in that victim world, and now they're kind of forced to go, well, how can I do things differently, or how can I live my life? Because I have to figure it out now. It's been almost a year that we've had these changes, and we don't know really what's going to happen like throughout this year as well, and the comfort levels of people and things. So what can we do, like in the way of helping people in
yeah,
respect to
sure.
2021?
Well, I mean, the first thing is not to make it matter in that way. You know, the first thing is really, what would you love? It's no different to what it's ever been. You know, what is it you would love? What
Yeah.
would you love to see in the world? What would you love to create in the world? Um, because as soon as you have that contrast, as soon as you've got something else, you know, a different experience, a different orientation to your current reality, is the expression that we use, to what's going on in the moment, or what you believe and perceive is going on in the moment, which may actually not be quite the same thing. Um, then there's an opportunity for growth. There's an opportunity for creation. There's an opportunity to be in that imagination, in the unknown, and you know, the magic that can happen in that space, the possibility, the innovation, the wisdom, the creativity. All of those things can flourish from that space. So to some extent, it is setting aside the undoubted pain and fear and discomfort and anger and all those emotions that are going on around, particularly around COVID, but just in life generally, and saying, okay, I see you, but there's this thing over there that I would love instead.
Mm. Yep.
Um, yeah, and then allowing that discomfort, the tension between those two, to inspire you. It might sound crazy. We're talking about attention inspiring, but
Mm.
it does. If you acknowledge both of those orientations, and if you acknowledge that both of those things are happening, not denying either, not trying to fix either, into that space, wisdom flows, and that's where the
Mm.
innovation, the creativity, the inspired thing to do next comes into that space. Um, so that would be my answer to that. Is but in particular, don't make 2021 mean anything more than anything else, you know.
Y-
And to some
Yep.
extent, don't make the vaccine and or COVID mean anything more than anything else. There are
Mm.
circumstances, and we can uh, choose to make them mean whatever we choose to make them mean. Um, you know, and don't get me wrong, there are thousands of people around the world dying, and that is terrible. So I'm not denying or decrying the circumstances, but we
Mm.
don't have to give it meaning other than what we, you know, what we would love to create.
Yeah. And you know what you're sort of saying there also, if I put it into context of like my birthday last year,
Mm,
like when you talk about that tension, the tension could be, and if somebody's got a birthday coming up soon, for example, the tension of wanting to have an event and then trying to figure out what is possible under the conditions that are allowable, and then how you would love to celebrate it will help you pop up those ideas. That's
mm,
like a real life example of how
exactly.
people can do that, can't they?
Mm,
Yeah, and that's a lot of the work that we do in supporting people in how they can do that in a classroom or a one-to-one environment. Yeah.
absolutely.
And
That,
so,
well,
sorry.
yeah, no, carry on. Yeah.
Um, so let's just talk a bit about lessons learned maybe, and this probably kind of follows on a little bit into the next one as well, about, you know, what things, you know, have maybe your clients tried and then abandoned or had to change direction, or what lessons have been sort of learned in the experiences that we've had or you've seen with your clients.
Mm. Well, I think in as a summary, because everyone's reactions are going to be different and unique. But to kind of generalize, it's, including myself, most of us are trying to control the situation in some fashion. Um, that's been the experience of most of my clients. It's been my experience uh, that sense of being so much out of control um, is uh, is difficult for everybody, even those people who are not normally, that's not normally their primary pattern that plays out for them. Um, because it is so very different. As I say, and it can throw people into whatever their pattern is. So if one is a people pleaser, for the sake of argument, you're going to be trying to people please and people please and people please. And what often happens in that scenario, there comes a switch gets pushed and it goes over into very overt anger. You know, you not see how much I've been looking after you or looking out for you or whatever it is. So things can play out in different ways, but that's what I've observed. A lot more of the control, and it's not so much necessarily controlling others, it's trying to control the situation, trying to control the circumstances and your place in that. And that tends to be very mental in nature. You know, it's a lot of thinking, it's a lot of going inwards and into the head, which can be very tiring. I mean, it's just purely on a kind of chemical or medical basis, you know, it uses up more energy than any other organ in the body. So the more we're trying to think our way out of things, the more tiring it can be. And it also makes us very insular. It can take us really inwards. And I'm talking for myself here, you know, it is one of my patterns anyway, but I've noticed it in this time that it's trying to figure out, trying to think out how to do things, trying to have a process, you know. And what I've learned in contrast is that absolutely have a structure, you know, have a method, have a plan, but it doesn't have to, you know, it doesn't have to be rigid and absolutely this way. We can't control this. We can't control anything in life, really. And so, but what we can do is we can have structures that help us. So when I know that when I do my choices, which is one of the processes that we do as a kind of quasi affirmation of the things that I would love to create, when I do those regularly, you know, firstly it makes me feel good, you know. There is a joy in it, but also I'm more focused on the things that I'm creating those things. And the other things is nature. You know, when I go out in nature, particularly around water. So, you know, I even in winter, I quite often just take the shoes and socks off and walk on the grass. You know, just to be that grounded and that connected to nature and to water. So there's nurturing things like that that I do, which allow me to become present. And when I'm present, my thoughts and feelings have a lot less attachment. It's almost like you sink out of your head and into your heart or into your body at least. So
yeah, that just leads me on to thinking about like before, you know, I moved really over into my coaching environment. One of the real passions I had was in the corporate world, like Wellbeing, for example. Wellbeing has been kind of in a number of organizations I've worked in, really the talk that they have, but it's not always really embedded in the day-to-day operational aspects of the business. And I think one thing about what happened in 2020 might have given people more maybe insight and conviction really to look after themselves and their health and become more grounded and think about their well-being maybe a little bit better. And I'm hoping that as a result of some of what's happened, that the environments in the workplaces do change and do allow people to have much more work-life balance and the ability to really improve their health or just enjoy their life a lot more. I mean, that working the way that we have has hopefully been the, you know, the I guess change that people have kind of seen, like, was it really worth it, all the hours that I've put in, when actually life is so fragile and can change so dramatically. And actually, how can I make sure that I'm really giving myself an enjoyable life as well as doing all the necessary things? So hopefully the well-being is improving, and you know, things like you're doing, nurturing yourself with walking on the grass or taking time in nature. I think more people in this country have been pushed out into the parks and stuff, which is wonderful.
Yeah. We could be the fittest we've ever been it's sorry, not as we've ever been, but certainly for the last 20, 30 years as a species, you know. It's
and especially under these conditions, because it's so easy to go, I'm not going out in that rain.
Well,
The
you see,
weather.
I have a choice about being a warrior for water, and I don't wholly know what that means. That's partly what our choices are like. I know that making powerful impacts for water-based projects and things of that nature. But I went out today in the pouring rain with no hat on or anything else to feel myself as much immersed in water as it was possible. Well, not as much as it was possible. I could have walked around naked, but I think that might have got a few objections.
Maybe you'd rest.
So yeah, I genuinely miss swimming. I do open water swimming and stuff like that. So, but it was still an expression of it, because there is magic in water. You only have to look at the teachings of Dr. Yamoto and stuff. The work he did around water crystals. The messages in water. I think the book was called. It's an amazing substance, and we are however many percent of it. That's the main constitution of our anatomy as well. So there's a real connection there. It's probably no coincidence I've got that picture behind me.
Well, I love what you mentioned as well, because certainly that has been in some of the words that I write in my posts and stuff, and some more of the things that I'm going to be writing about, like how being such a water-based individual as we are, and it's how you can influence water, like the shape that you're talking about with that experiment, that the thoughts and feelings influence those waters to make those shapes. And if that's what's happening there, then that's also happening inside of us. So we really are creating some experiences that maybe we don't want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the lunar cycles and these kinds of things, the difference in the gravitational pull when we're that much water, and so on and so forth. There's lots of connections to water.
Yeah, for sure. And
back to the seasons and the cycles again.
Well, it's nature, isn't it? And we're part of nature. We got to recognize that, haven't we? Yeah. And really just get more time in it, because it's lovely, and it does make such a huge difference to your mental state and your well-being, really, to be able to get some outdoor activity or some natural, get away from the cities, really.
And I guess that back to that's what I was talking about with these structures. They can be very nurturing, as long as they don't have to be rigid. But they're nurturing, and then from that space, it's easy to be more yourself, more your true self.
So thinking about 2021 and the things that we've just been talking about, like this, there is possibilities for people that can enjoy the experiences that they're looking for 2021, create some experiences and sort of start thinking about now how they could do that. What sort of, maybe two questions here. What tips would you give people around that? And also, what would people's life be like if they actually chose to look at the things that they would love to do and follow through on those things?
Well, there might be three answers then, because the follow through and the rest of it is a slightly different answer. But just allow yourself to dream, allow yourself to imagine, with the focus on the life you would love to create, because actually most of life is an imagination anyway. We've imagined our circumstances to date, and we will imagine our circumstances in the future. So if we acknowledge that, beyond the kind of esoteric, that there is only this moment, and if we do allow ourselves to have a future, then why not create that future? Why not imagine that future as one that you would really love to live in? So that's the first bit. Just to really allow yourself to imagine, allow yourself to dream. In a grounded way, in a practical way. This is not there are some modalities out there that put all of the power into a loving universe. I'll stand for something that I would love to create, and I don't have to do anything about it, really, type thing. And which is just a misconception or a misunderstanding of some of the teachings. Which then comes on to the second part, which is what you do about it. Well, I mean, I'll come back to the same again. Once you have something that you would love that you don't currently have, then just the very disparity, you don't have it, the not having of it creates disparity, creates that discomfort, that tension that we were talking about. Then you've got choice. You can choose to remain where you are. You can choose to allow your thoughts and feelings to hold you back from the having of this thing, or you can allow yourself to be inspired, or to receive insight or intuition or inspiration that you and I know will serve, but someone experiencing that for the first time might think, well, let's just give that a try, and in the trying of it, in the taking the action, that's where the magic happens. You can have all the awareness in the world, which is where sometimes these modalities do go awry. You can have all the awareness in the world of what you'd love. You can even receive some wisdom around how you might achieve it. But unless and until you actually do it, you don't have the having of it. The alchemists talk about applying the red tincture, which was the final stage in alchemy, where it's about making the fixed volatile, taking the lead and make it ethereal or volatile in nature, and then making the volatile fixed. And that's what we're doing there. We're fixing our dream back down into the gold of the reality of that dream, or that vision, or that imagination. So you're right. There's very much two steps to that question. And I'm not sure I've answered all of the questions, but to the last bit, there are two steps to it.
Yeah, I've got an example that I actually use in one of my trainings about that, might help explain that for the people that are listening to this. And I think about it in a way of like, I mean, we all create things throughout the year. We're all going to create birthdays and celebrations and all sorts of things. And so we do actually automatically go, I'm going to have this event. I want that. And then I go and take some steps towards doing it, or I imagine what I'd like before I actually start taking steps. And so one of the ideas that I put to people is when I'm trying to explain the feminine and masculine energies, which is what we're talking about, like bringing that thing together in the, applying the red tincture that as you talk about. If you wanted to go on a shopping trip or even a holiday, you have that idea in your mind, but if you take no action, it just disappears and evaporates.
Yeah.
But if you then suddenly go, where would I like to go? Would I like to go to the beach, and just allow that to happen in your mind and get excited about it? Or even I'd like to go on a shopping trip and I want to go to this particular shop, or want to buy this particular item. You start to imagine in your mind more detail around that thought that you originally had. And then you start taking further steps, like you said, where do I want to go? What do I want to get? And you start then putting into place little action steps that will make that happen. Like you said, make it come into reality, or adding the red tincture to make it a fixed thing in your life. So maybe that helps people trying to understand a simple task that we do day to day. We're always doing this, and sometimes we think, oh, that's too much, I can't actually do it.
Yeah, thank you for grounding me out. I can be a little esoteric on occasion, but it is that thing, as you say, of standing for something, receiving. So I give you a very simple example. I posted it on Facebook today. I have a choice around a deeper connection with ancient wisdom and cultures, and so that was a couple of days ago, and then the same day into my inbox from Gaia, which is a website that I connected to, but was a thing about ancient civilizations and the symbology of it. Now, okay, that is a topic that they talk about, but firstly, I could have not seen that email.
Yep.
They could have not sent that email. I could have dismissed it when I saw it. But so that's the awareness. So there's something I'd love to have more connection with ancient wisdom, etc. And so the unit goes, oh, here you go, have some of that.
Yeah.
We've heard you, have some of that. But I've still got to go and watch those videos. If I don't watch the videos, I've not applied the red tincture, or whatever you want to call it. I've not taken the final action to have the having of the deeper connection with ancient wisdom and civilizations.
Yeah.
So there's a very simple example there.
Yeah. And that's some of the work that we do with people, isn't it? Like helping them identify what are those real, true things that they would love, and then helping them with some structures that allow them to effortlessly create them
Mm.
through, a kind of a series of structures or series of steps in a period of time, gets them to those places where they can have those big dreams and big goals, even that they might be thinking of.
Well, I had a phenomenal example in one of the groups that I run, of a guy. He came to a session that was predominantly around practicing the approach. But what became obvious in that space, he was the only one that came, which, sometimes that's phenomenal. They get a 2 hour, that 90-minute, 2 hour one-to-one with Stuart. So we actually did the process, the land of plenty process, which you and I know, which is to go imaginatively into the land where everything you'd love to create exists. And the first thing he became of, kind of almost like a gift when he arrived, was a puppy. And they'd been they had looked to get a family puppy and had actually been scammed. The people purporting to be selling it, it was a scam. So his initial reaction was, "Oh, I've got that." He could have been very much in his beliefs and all the rest of it. "Oh, well, I've sod that, I've been there, done that, not going to try that again."
Had a bad experience.
Had a bad experience, exactly. So but he didn't. But when he actually crafted the choice, the choice that he crafted was, choose the end result of our golden retriever, family golden retriever, or something. I can't remember what it was. So they didn't even mention the word puppy.
Oh.
The next day, their older son, who doesn't live with them, said, "One of my friends has got this dog. They're having a new baby, and they're not sure they can keep the dog. It's rather too lively." So Scott says, "Oh yeah, what, tell us some more about it." "Well, it's this 2-year-old golden retriever." And
Wow.
so now they have taken this dog on, at least, to see whether she settles, because it would be a challenge for both parties if she doesn't. So the red tincture hasn't been fully the creation is not fully in place, but that all happened in 2 days. And
Amazing.
it was things like, they'd had plans for the for the morning, and there was all the stuff around, the COVID rules. Would it be appropriate? And all of that tension was in the mix as well. I've probably outed him now. Get the COVID police out, but all of that stuff that could have blocked it and stopped it, because it was still true to have this family dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's just a magical example.
Yeah. And so that's just a perfect example to say that no matter what's going on in the circumstances around it, that person still had that dream and was able to make it happen. So we don't actually have to give up on the things that we love just because of our circumstances that might be different to what they were last year or the year before. Because actually our circumstances change all the time. We're probably a little bit more comfortable with some of them than others.
Yeah.
And so we can always create and innovate, which is, I guess, really one of the beautiful things about what we do.
Yeah, I mean, so even in the weekend, the Sunday morning, there's the tension about there were other things, we've got to unpick all these other plans and all the rest of it. But then there's the tension around, not supposed to be going out for unnecessary journeys and all this kind of stuff, the safety angle and all the rest of it. But you innovate.
Yeah.
You make sure that everyone is socially distanced. You make sure that everyone's protected. I don't know, whatever else that was true for them to do in that moment.
Yeah.
I'm sure they met outside and so on and so on. So it's if something's true, then there are ways of making it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, final question, really, before we kind of just finish off with some comments. I've got it. It says actually, what new ideas have you come up with, or innovations? But really, I want to kind of extend that to, I mean, we've just talked about that people can innovate and that sort of thing, like, and maybe not necessarily just you, but clients and people that you've worked with. I mean, you've just given us an example about this person getting his puppy, but what, when we think about this year ahead, and people might be thinking, oh, it's the same as it was last year, I can't do what I want. What would you kind of give as guidance?
Yeah, well, another client comes to mind, and actually quite a good friend as well. But and I am not, I am so grateful not to be the parent of young children in this environment, and I am grateful not to have dependent elderly relatives as well. I am blessed in both of those regards, if you like. But she embraced the home education to such an extent. It has completely transformed her relationship with her son.
Wow.
Her son is doing some amazing things now, because I think he's 11 or 12 or something. So he's starting to be adult enough to do more and more things, and the things that he's creating are amazing, and it's because of that attention, and to some extent the release and relief of not having to do things exactly the way that some civil servant has dictated you should be educated,
Mm.
without opening up that whole
Yep.
Pandora's box. And she is now coaching other people in homeschooling. So that's the shift that's happened in 2020.
Yay.
Yeah, well, it's true for some people.
Yeah.
But it's that she probably started off with, oh my God, how am I going to do anything with him in the background, or whatever. It could be that kind
Mm.
of sense of things. And then
Yeah.
how am I going, what is the school going to be, what part are they going to play, what part am I going to play? We've only got one device, and I work on that, as you were doing other things at the time, and still does some of those in the background. But you just make them happen.
Mm.
That's what I think. Actually, one of the great things about this is it allowed people to let go of some of their stuff. It's exacerbated it in some ways, but in other ways it's let it go, because there is no point in railing against something that you can't influence. Once the anger and the fear has subsided a bit, you kind of think, well, okay, how do I make the best of this? And
Yep.
I don't like good, bad, best, but it's
Mm.
what's true to do now, in the circumstances that we have, with this current reality going on, of these things that I'd love to create. And so that's what she's done. She's lent into that, and uses her experience of that and the transformation in her son as an example for other parents that want to do the same thing.
Yeah. But I do want to just pick up on that point there. You said where you don't like using them, make the best of it. But I think that's probably something that people will resonate with, in
Yeah,
that
yeah.
Actually you can have a really amazing year, and it's just, maybe you've got to do things a little bit different to the way that you did, or you've got to think of new ideas, and you've got to think about, how would I love that experience to be? So where previously we might have been a little bit more passive in what we want, now we have a little bit more active in our imagination about what we really would love. And so you can have an amazing year, and we should really be focusing, like all of the people that we work with, and people watching this, if they reach out to us, we can help them. We can have an amazing year, and you can have an amazing year, whoever's watching, really, by choosing that that's what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And by just going, well, I'm going to make it happen. These circumstances are as they are, but what do I want? Like you said, what do you love? What would
Yeah.
you love? What's true for you?
Well, I'd reframe it that it's just semantics in the words, perhaps, but it's making your best life
Yeah.
rather than making the most of the best of life.
Perfect.
That's the distinction I was making.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Lovely. Well, it's been wonderful having you on here tonight. And thank you so much for, giving some tips and guidance to people and talking about experiences that you've had in other clients of yours. Now we're going to post some contact details so you can get in touch with Stuart should you want to reach out to him and work with him. But in just some closing comments or any tips for people about having the 2021 that they would love, what would you finish off with?
I think just come back to what I said before, just dream and purposeful dreaming, that imagination, really allow the fullness, the richness of what it is you'd love to create to be there. So I don't mean dream in a wishy-washy way. I mean, purposeful, imaginative vision dreaming.
Yeah. That actually led me on to thinking about when you were talking about the Land of Plenty exercise that you did. It's actually a beautiful shamanic technique, which is a lovely experience. So, if people are interested in that, do reach out to Stuart for some support in creating a Land of Plenty or going through that experience yourself.
That'd be my joy.
Perfect. Right, so thank you very much. We will put the contact details on this video and we'll share it on a few different platforms so you can watch it for those of you who haven't managed to join tonight. We didn't get any questions from the audience, actually.
I wondered whether...
Exactly, that was the whole point of having them here. But over time, I guess there'll be more people present. I'm not sure why they haven't shown up tonight. But they can watch back the video. Do post any questions in the comments and we can come back to you as well, and certainly reach out to us if we can help you. And looking forward to having people on next week and a new guest.
Fantastic, and thanks for having me, Marilyn. It's been a real treat. I love spending time with you anyway, but
Thank you.
It's been lovely to share some thoughts.